a formal welcome to TFN's Audit and Governance Committee. My name's Graham Bell. I'm the independent member and committee chair. Our last meeting was in December, if you can believe that, immediately before the board meeting. We don't have Paul Kelly with us today, the finance director, but we do have Martin Tugwell, who is the chief exec of TFN. Now, I'm sure, Martin, you don't need an introduction to officers and staff because you probably know them well enough. But I wondered whether we could just do a very quick run round so you knew who people.
For the members of the committee,
Yes.
that'd be very helpful.
Yes.
Thank you.
Excellent. So, Councillor Baker-Rogers, can I start with you?
Hi there, Martin. Nice to meet you. I am Councillor Baker-Rogers. I'm a councillor for Rotherham. I've been on this committee for a few years now. I'm now cabinet member for adult social care and health, but I have a background in audit over many decades, and I really like being involved in this committee and seeing where we can take transport for the north. I've come by train again. I love coming by train. It's very convenient and easy. Thank you.
Colin McLaren, councillor for Chatterton North Ward and Oldham. So on maybe one of the shorter journeys this morning. This is my second meeting on this committee. But in Oldham, I chair one scrutiny committee, vice chair of three others, and on various other joint health scrutiny committees of one sort or another. So strong scrutiny background and various other committees, licensing and so forth at various times.
Good morning. My name is Richard Thomas, independent member. I think this is probably my fifth or sixth meeting of the committee that I've attended. I'm head of audit and risk at St Helens Council.
Grand, thank you. Can I ask Alex and Daniel just to introduce very quickly, if Martin doesn't already know? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Daniel Watson, partner with Forbes Mazars, the external auditor. I've been auditing transport for North now for 2 years. Also audit Mersey Travel, and prior to coming here was the auditor for transport for Greater Manchester as well.
Lovely to meet you. So I'm Alex Hymer, director within RSM, and we provide your internal audit services.
Splendid. Thank you. Bless you. Right. So we are corporate, Joanne, in terms of membership.
Yes, Chair, we're corporate. Thank you.
Right. Super. So we have a reasonably full agenda. Hopefully people have seen it. It's not as full as it was in December, so small blessings, I suppose. Let me just take us through the initial elements. So in terms of declarations of interest, does anybody have anything which they wish to raise, either in general or in respect of any item on the agenda? I'll take that as no, thank you. The minutes from the previous meeting, I shan't go through them in detail, but I did highlight just a couple of points just so that we don't lose sight of them, I guess. So spending review was mentioned as part of the last meeting a couple of times. And I think that's probably something that is captured or will be captured as part of Martin's update in respect of business planning and future budget. So I don't think there's anything to mention there other than the fact that we obviously are not losing sight of the current situation. We spoke a little bit about deep dives and how we might need to adjust the deep dive schedule, again, in response to what the forward business plan looks like. It's perhaps an obvious thing, but in terms of process, we just perhaps need to ensure that we do treat the deep dive schedule as a flexible list rather than something which is overly rigid. We spoke a little bit about internal audit effectiveness, and we can pick this up as part of the report pack, Alex, but there was there was something that I don't think we necessarily resolved at the last meeting, which was about how we monitor the performance of internal audit, specifically in respect of the new code. So I know that you've already got metrics in respect of audit performance. Are those metrics exactly the same as the ones in the code? That would be a nice bit of mirroring, but we can pick that up again later on. And the other thing which I've had an update on this morning already was the anti-fraud policy. We did speak about anti-fraud last time. I've provided some feedback to Joanne in respect of what we're saying in the governance statement on anti-fraud. My view, and this is something that hasn't really changed over the last 3 years, is that TFN is a little reactive sometimes in how it reports the effectiveness of anti-fraud policy. It's almost like, you're driving your car, you haven't had a crash, therefore your driving must be okay. That isn't always the case. So it's really thinking about how we can be more proactive, I guess, as an organisation in respect of fraud. And I spoke to Alex and Joanne earlier about how we could potentially include fraud in this year's audit schedule, but Alex can update us on that at the relevant point. So they were my reflections on the previous minutes. Has anybody else got any comments? We're good. Excellent. So I think we're on to item 4, Joanne, which is monitoring effectiveness of Audit and Governance Committee and its work. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. What we're going to do after this meeting today is we're going to roll out the SIPFA self-assessment tool of good practice by way of a survey. The tool of good practice allows members to evaluate the impact and their effectiveness of the committee. We're going to continue to do this on an annual basis, and we started it last year. The purpose of the self-assessment is to develop the committee and assist it and TFN as a whole in providing the required assurances via the annual governance statement. The outcome of the first survey led to the preparation and the implementation of an induction pack for all members. And also we undertook a skills survey of all members and senior officers at TFN. We've got Stephen Hitwell here, Head of HR at TFN, who is going to speak to us about the results once I've finished speaking. As I said, we're proposing to send the survey out after this meeting, and we'll be sending it to all elected members and senior officers, and we're asking for a return date of the 1st of April. The survey will be sent by officers on behalf of our chair of the Audit and Governance Committee. I would now like to pass you on to Stephen so he can talk you through the results, and then we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Joanne. Members will recall that a competency framework was previously developed and approved by the Audit and Governance Committee and established the competencies that were considered to be collectively required of the committee to enable it to fully and effectively discharge its various roles and responsibilities. Having formally adopted this competency framework, members and officers of the Audit and Governance Committee were asked to complete a self-assessment survey aligned to this framework. Thank you all for completing that survey. The survey sought to establish competency levels across each of the 17 competency areas on a scale between 1 and 4, 1 being little or no experience, up to 4 being specialist knowledge / experience. The overall assessment score, that's the score across all of the competency areas combined, is a score of 3.14, somewhere between well-informed and specialist knowledge. This rating should give the committee confidence regards the overall collective competency levels across the Audit and Governance Committee to carry out its assigned roles and responsibilities. There were 4 areas out of 17 of the competency areas across the whole survey where the average score dipped below a rating of 3. And these were TFN culture, values and ways of working, IT and cyber security, HR and people management, and finally transport planning, policy and strategy. In terms of this final category, this was a 0.5 points lower than any other competency area. So that was by far the lowest rating over the 17 competencies. It is proposed that development activities for the year ahead are focused on the 2 lowest scoring elements of the survey, namely culture, values and ways of working, which will also look to cover elements of HR and people management, and transport planning, policy and strategy. It is recommended that we develop and deliver briefing sessions, sort of deep dive sessions covering across each of these competency areas over the next 6 to 9 month period. And these will be for those members who wish to attend on a non-mandatory basis. We will also look to record those sessions for those that aren't able to attend, and it will also enable these sessions to be delivered to any new members joining the Audit and Governance Committee in future. As was previously agreed, this survey will be repeated on a periodic basis, and we'll look to continue to monitor the collective capability of the Audit and Governance Committee to carry out its various functions. So they're the sort of recommendations coming out of the survey. As they're happy to take any questions on the survey results or the proposed areas for developmental actions over the next sort of 9 to 12 month period. Thank you.
Stephen, Joanne, thank you. I'd like to ask members, Councillor Baker-Rogers first, in respect of points.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the information on the findings of the skills survey completed. Can I ask, why can't we just have training on all 4 of the lowest scoring areas? And don't you think that IT and cyber security is something that everyone needs training on, given that every week in the news there'll be a firm that should have top-notch cyber security that is apparently being hacked?
Thank you. There's no reason why we couldn't look to provide briefings or training across each of those 4. As I said, on the sort of culture, values and ways of working, I think the intention would be that that would cover off HR and people management as well. So that's, I guess, 3 of the 4. We can certainly look to develop and deliver a session around IT and cyber security as well, if members would find that helpful.
Right, thank you. No, it's a good challenge. Thank you, John. I think there is a point to bear in mind, I guess, is I think the survey and looking at self awareness amongst committees is exactly the right thing to do, and we should be proud that we're doing that. But part of that is not necessarily to deliver IT and cyber training full stop. It's perhaps better delivered, and it might sit better if it's very tailored towards the organisation and our role in support of that organisation. That would be my only comment, but it might help just to narrow that. Otherwise, you potentially training everybody on everything, which isn't.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point, Graham. The intention would be to obviously focus the training and briefing around members' specific roles and responsibilities in terms of servicing their duties under the Audit and Governance Committee, rather than trying to upskill in terms of all elements of IT or cyber security, or indeed any of the other competency areas that have been identified.
And just to clarify, these sessions are intended to be in addition to our routine committee meetings.
Yes, the intention would be that it would run separately on separate dates and times to the actual committee meetings themselves. And as I say, if members aren't able to attend, we would look to record so they could watch them back at a later date if they are not able to make the actual sessions themselves.
Grand. Other members' comments? Colin?
Thank you, Chair. I think for me that the most difficult one to answer is question 27, and given we've got Martin here, it might be something he could help me with anyway. It's demonstrating or you know having assurance that the audit committee adds value to the board. So I'd just like to maybe explore how it's perceived from the board side rather than sort of committee out.
Well, let me start off by saying I think my observation, my reflection is I think it is valued by the main board. The chair comes once a year and does an update to the main board. The board itself obviously is signing off things like the annual governance statement, of which the audit and governance process is there. The chair and myself meet a couple of times a year. I think we're now meeting on just to talk through things. And I think we've both found that quite helpful as well, in terms of me being able to share with the chair some of those sort of bigger picture, kind of what's currently happening, what's the trend and what have you. Likewise, it gives the chair a chance just to feed back to me. And I know you've had one, we're looking to have a session with the chair as well of the main board. So I think my reflection is, the strength of TFN particularly is the governance and the framework we have. Having the audit and governance committee there to provide that check and that assurance is really valued, not just from the individual members but also from the independent members. That I think is also reassuring, and I've heard the main board reflect that is, it's one of those things where probably the fact that it is a good feedback from the committee to the board almost kind of means it may not have the debate that if it was something that was awry. So I think it's almost the length of the debate. It reflects the fact that there's a confidence of the board and also the work of this committee.
Thank you both. Anything else, Richard? Everybody else okay? Grand, again, thank you. I just to repeat the point, so I think it is worth repeating. I think although self-assessment is notoriously difficult to calibrate, one person's view of what the question means is obviously going to be different, and when you redo it, your own view of the question might change. But I think having that mechanism in place is viewed as best practice. It's exactly the right thing to do. I think self-awareness amongst committee members is viewed as very much the way forward in terms of committee performance and committee effectiveness. I think just to pick up on Martin's point about the value of the committee, I think the board are also familiar with the committee's structure within their own constituencies as well. So they have a sort of double layer of assurance activity, and can you identify specific decisions where the work of the committee contributed? That might be tricky. Doesn't mean it's not valued, no. but it's always the right question to ask, I think, because we need to be very clear about outcomes and value and yeah. Grand, thank you. So I think we are. Daniela, I think we are onto risk. Have I got that correct?
Yep.
Right. So risk register and deep dive on legal compliance, I believe. Over to you.
Okay, so first of all, I thought it might be worth noting that the exec summary is slightly out of date now, and the reason for that is TFN received the funding announcement for 25-26 on the 24th of February. So the next steps TFN have been working on is finalising the business plan for 25-26. And it's also important to note that the planning assumptions that were made are in line with the funding announcement. So we've been finalising the business plan, ensuring that the key corporate milestones have been updated ahead of board approval on the 17th of March. And then in terms of preparing for the spending review, which Martin will touch on later. That's the main focus in terms of the executive summary. In terms of the next steps for the risk register, I think the key things now is to look at the functional risk registers to ensure that they align with the business plan for 2025-26. but also to look at the corporate register as well. And that will be updated to reflect the business plan and the key corporate milestones. Don't think there's anything else that is worth highlighting in terms of updates to the register. Based on the last meeting that we had, we've incorporated now within the executive summary a statement around an update around devolution. So where at the moment, currently the TFN executive is reviewing the devolution white paper to understand and gain further clarity, including proposals for emerging. I think that's the only things that might be worth highlighting on that. Has anyone got any questions around the corporate risk register in terms of updates?
Pushka, go ahead.
I'm just wondering, how often do we update this? Because at the minute, I feel that politically the landscape is changing every day. If we go on BBC News in the morning, it's changing every day. And I'm just wondering, do we need to do more regular updates to the risk register to ensure that any significant changes are captured as they actually happen?
So currently the risk register is updated on a quarterly basis. However, it is always monitored in terms of the environment that we're facing, the landscape that we're in. So if there's anything where I'd feel or a member of the TFN executive feel that we need to sort of look at an update in terms of relevant controls or actions, that would be done. It wouldn't be just a case of we'd wait every 3 months for an update. It would be that we'd highlight it as an area that we need to look at sort of quite quickly, especially, for example, where we've got a situation where we've now received our funding allocation for 25-26, and it does sit in line with the planning assumptions that we've made. So currently we're in a position where we review the register in line with that to make sure it's sort of up to date, really. So it's not just a case of we'd only look at every 3 months. If anything was to change and the landscape is, as you say, always evolving at the moment, then we would update it if it needed to be.
Questioning on that. So if there was a significant change, if you had to add in another risk and it was red, or you had risks that were amber that became red, would you communicate that to the members of this committee before the next meeting? Because I just feel it's very important for us to be kept up to speed with any significant changes.
We could do, yes. I don't think that would be a problem.
Yeah, go on, Martin, go ahead.
As I'm here, I might as well. I think just to reassure members of this committee, obviously through the legal services team and the democratic services team, there's a strong working relationship with all of our members and also with government. So some of these things that are quite regular topics within national, regional, local media, they are parts of processes which are kind of being going. So, for example, we know for some time about the progress in terms of devolution and the implications that would have for the number of constituent authorities, the implications it might have for the way the Rail North Committee or indeed the main board works. So there's been quite a bit of work done through the General Purposes Committee to understand what the implications of that might be, and then to work through in terms of that with the partners and ultimately with the board. Some of the things that are out there at the moment, things like the devolution white paper, members will be aware that there's a consultation at the moment around some aspects of rail reform, and rail reform is one of those things that is being flagged up in the risk register. I think it's important, first of all, to understand that consultation is only one small aspect of rail reform. It's about it's about a consultation that would shape prospective legislation. In terms of the more fundamental way in which the rail system works, that's been a piece of work that's been underway for some time and continues to go forward. We keep a regular watch on that within the quarterly review that we do as the operating board within the TFN executive. So I would hope we're kind of able to anticipate in the risk register where there are potential opportunities. I I would be surprised if, I would hope we would be surprised if there was anything that came completely out of left field. But I take the point, councillor, that if we're in that situation, then it would be not just a conversation we would need with this committee, we would need to have that with the members themselves. And there are mechanisms that we can do, which we could replicate for the committee in that situation.
Grant, thank you. I forgive me, Richard. I know that you raised a number of points prior to the meeting in respect to risk register. I didn't know if there was anything that you wanted to share as part of that dialogue, or if you were comfortable.
Thank you, Chair. I think my comment was to do with the deep dive, but I do have a comment on the general. So it's a comment and an observation, really. The first comment, which I think I've mentioned before, is just, Daniela, thanks. I think it's a really good risk report. I enjoy reading it. I know how difficult it is to keep risk management at the forefront and on agendas. The point is, when I look at control levels and action descriptions, just to give me a better idea of whether something's on time, going well, going badly, is the due, in the due column, we've just got ongoing. That doesn't give me a sense of whether it's going to be ongoing for years, decades, months. So it would just be helpful, I suppose, just against each of those control actions, which are there to bring risk. I'm assuming to bring risk within your tolerance, that I could see then, looking at the due dates, whether things are on track or not. The other question is just, it's a very comprehensive report. I was just wondering, is the risk management system that is it a system, or is it a series of spreadsheets? I'm just wondering about whether Transport for the North officers can open up the risk management system and go in and update when they choose. So is it a piece of software you've got which generates this document?
Thanks, Richard. So in terms of the first question, and I know we've discussed this as a committee before in terms of the ongoing, I think the way TFN operate, we do have a number of actions that you will see as ongoing. However, that's not to say that they're not monitored when needed and regularly updated. It's not just something that's sat there static and it doesn't get looked at. I think what we've tried to do more recently, and we've tried to do this by bringing it out in emerging risk and the exec summaries, where there's certain actions, very high or high risks, we've tried to give a little bit of an update on those actions in terms of where we're at with them. For now, in terms of putting due dates on some of these risks, it can be quite difficult because it is on some of them, it is an action that would be ongoing for. However, as part of the deep dives as well that we do on the corporate risk register and the assurance process that we've got in place, I hope that would be enough to sort of give assurance that, and if there was a specific area where you said, well, we've had this action for a while and it's ongoing, could you just elaborate on it more? Or we'll try and bring that out in the executive summary where we can. I think that's probably the best approach with that. And then in terms of the second question, yes, we do use a risk management software. In terms of ownership of that sits with myself, but we have a number of risk champions that sit across the functional areas of TFN. And what they do is they update the risk management software, and then they then send appropriate emails with what changes have been made to the risk registers to the members of staff. And there's an owner and an approver process in place to ensure it's in line with governance arrangements that we have. Hope that helped.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it may be just because some of these things which are listed in my head maybe aren't actions as such. So, for example, control measure 1571, TFN has the right levels of insurance cover. That's fine. That is a given. It's not something, you would expect that. If that was that you were just going out to retender all your insurance provisions or your insurance portfolio, then that would be an action with a an end date, I suppose. So it's separating things which are actions and things which are kind of business as usual controls. That's
Grand, thank you. Just to pick up on that point Richard made, I think if this was a project report, I think the project board would expect some sort of heat map, a red, amber, green almost against each of those. So it for some of those actions, maybe an end date wouldn't be appropriate, but you could still give the audience a sense of, is it on track, or is it something that's going to require some additional effort or activity? So down that right-hand column, you could almost red, amber, green everything individually, depending on the level of comfort that you and management had in respect of where that was going. So that might be easier than trying to nail a date on something that doesn't easily think about a date. But you might also ask, throw Richard's question into the audience internally in terms of how they, what else could we do to that to help them get a quicker, better sense of progress, I suppose. Anyway, grand, bless you. So I think we're straight into the deep dive, are we not?
So we'll go straight onto the deep dive now. And the deep dive that's scheduled for today is TFN fails to comply with applicable law and exceeds its powers while carrying out its functions. Joanne and Gavin have joined us from the legal services to take some questions on the deep dive. So in terms of, I know Richard, and thanks for that, Richard. We will incorporate your questions in terms of one of those controls that's there in more detail as well. So Joanne, I'll leave it with you if that's okay.
Thank you, Daniela. So we had a question from Richard about what control mechanisms we have in place to monitor changes in the law and assess how far those changes may affect TFN, and if when TFN is required to respond to those changes. In response to this, we have sufficient controls in place, and examples of these are, we have alerts which get sent to our inbox if there's any changes in legislation. We attend courses to keep up to date with changes in legislation or case law, or what is considered best practice. We are members of Lawyers in Local Government, and we subscribe to their weekly newsletters and also attend their courses. We also subscribe to a legal resource known as Public Law Company, and we receive emails from them regarding alerts. We also can download their precedents which are considered best practice, and they also have advice notes. We are also a member of EML LawShare, which is a framework for local government lawyers, and they have courses probably on a weekly basis. That's all from me, but Gavin, have you got anything else you'd like to add? Thank you.
I would just echo what Joanne said there. We've got all the mechanisms in place, and we do keep up to date with legal advice, and I think legal legislation. And the example is the recent Procurement Act that's just come into force last Monday, the 24th of February. All of the policies working with the procurement manager, who is qualified, has the procurement qualifications, and we've worked with them to update the constitution and all of our procurement policies as well. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Joanna, go ahead.
Thank you for that. I think it's very helpful to have a deep dive at this forum. I just wanted to know, do you consider best practice as well as laws? What do you do to monitor draft legislation? And do you keep an eye on things in terms of where the health and safety executive has fined or prosecuted other similar organisations, so that if there's any lessons learned, they can be taken and our processes changed to ensure that the same thing doesn't happen to us? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. That's a very good question. So in terms of monitoring draft legislation, we do that. An example would be where we had the draft procurement bill. Another example is where there's been a consultation on some new data protection legislation. So we've always got our eye on those things, but until they're actually implemented, we're you know, we can actually contribute to the consultation. So another example is where legal services worked with the chief executive and the rail advisor on the new bill, which was it about March of last year, on the new railway body for the UK, GBR. In terms of the health and safety executive, they do come up on our alert system, and we would always consider how this could affect our organisation and what do we need to do about it. Sorry?
About best practice as well.
Yes, so we're always looking at best practice. An example of where we've looked at best practice is that there was some guidance from SOLAS on the functionality of the statutory officers within an organisation, and I reviewed that and gave advice to the head of paid service, which is Martin Tugwell, and also the section 151 officer, which is Paul Kelly. And that was about, for example, what approvals you would need for the reports. And the advice I gave was that we had everything in place in relation to that, where all statutory officers are signing off those reports.
Do you think that the description, the cause and the impact needs to be worded to include best practice? Because I think you're doing more than you show you are doing there. And I think it's really important to actually demonstrate that you are doing an awful lot more than just applying with the law.
Thank you, Councillor. That's a very good point, and we'll amend that to include best practice as well. Thank you.
Be good. So my reflections. I think there are almost two distinct descriptions in here for me. One is in relation to TFN's very specific statutory position, and the other is compliance with the legal framework that every organisation has to comply with. So I think there is an argument for splitting it. I don't want to give you work or overcomplicate the risk register, but maybe a separate view might allow better visibility. And if you look at the legal framework that every organisation has to comply with, does the organisation have a register of those legal requirements? And we talked about the mechanism in terms of your awareness and visibility of changes, but I know a lot of organisations rely on an actual register of legal requirements or other obligations as part of that wider mechanism. And an associated question, I guess, is, are there any legal obligations for which the appetite is not zero? So the assumption is, when we talk about legal obligations, that our appetite is for 100% compliance, but that's an assumption. Do we state what our appetite is? Is it always zero? And then if you look at the risk scoring in terms of target score suggests a medium rating. So I look at the amber, yellow, medium, and think, well, we're kind of setting ourselves up potentially for, we're not compliant with these legal requirements, but we can live with that, which might be fine, but it's just worth, I think, testing that assumption, testing that position. Because if we have clarity on our legal position, our legal obligations, if our appetite is 0 for any non-compliance, I wouldn't have expected it to be yellow and a score of 11 as a target. Would be a way of thinking about it. So I think there's an opportunity to review perhaps how we're presenting it and how we're scoring it.
From my background, I've done an awful lot of international standards work to get organisations certified to an international standard, etc. So if you were certified to an ISO standard, you would have a compliance register, you would have a monitoring register, you would have an evaluation of compliance register. So I don't know if you want to consider something like that, because that would give you the assurance that you've not just got all the compliance requirements there, but you are actively evaluating, do you comply? Anyway, I just think that certification to international standards are very helpful. They're great at processes and making sure that you go that extra mile to ensure compliance with all applicable legislations and also best practice.
Grand, thank you. I'm a student of ISO work myself in the past, so yeah, I know where you're coming from. Grand, is that anything else, Danielle?
So I think if that's all the questions there is, I would like to just go through and have a look at the schedule, if you don't mind. I've got the next deep dive that we have scheduled for July. And the one that we scheduled was risk 311, which was around future timetable changes. But it's going to, on this one, when we've selected it, it's around having someone as well from Rail North Partnership to come to give us a little bit further clarity, which is something that we discussed at one of the committee meetings last year. So I think it feels like the right one that we should look at for next time, and I think the one after that is our most critical risk at the moment. However, if anyone feels differently, or if there's an area that we'd like to consider and escalate, we can do that. We can think about that.
So which is the one after the rail timetable?
So the one after the Rail North Partnership one would be risk 647, which is with significant investment in the North Railway system underway or planned. And given the interdependence, there is a risk that individual programmes are not aligned and expected benefits aren't realised.
Okay, so the next one is quite operational in nature. The one after that is more strategic in terms of planning. Does that sound okay to everybody? Actually,
Yes, I think it does. But given the political climate at the minute, should we be doing the strategic one first and then the operational one?
it's a very fair question. So can we leave that for your further consideration?
I think my advice, I can understand the thinking. I think my advice would be take it in the order you've currently got, because whilst they are related, the cycle around timetable changes, it's kind of, if you think that, say the December timetable changed this year, the conversations have been going on probably since last summer, and they get ramped up into so it's always about 9 to 18 months away. So that's an ongoing process with every year and every timetable change. So you can kind of get into that at almost any point. And I think, remind me, when's the next meeting? Yeah. So I think a meeting in July to talk about the timetable planning and how those changes, I think would be very helpful partly because it will be people will be aware of what's happening in December 25. So the ability of this committee just to reflect upon how it worked getting there, with then offering any thoughts and reflections about what might be better to be done the next time. I think the timing feels right. On the strategic overview, it's a very live topic in terms of some of the work around rail reform. We've got the consultation at the moment on the draft, which would lead into draft legislation, but that's more about structure of GBR moving forward. There is work that's being done with the rail industry around what we call the single overview, the one overview of integration in the north. I think if you're having that at your meeting after that, we would have probably got a little bit further with some of that mechanics. So again, it feels it would be quite timely, having started off with the conversation at the Rail North Committee last September, having worked with partners in the rail industry and indeed our partners in constituent authorities over the last few months to kind of start to put a bit of flesh on that, then to come to you as a bit of an opportunity to kind of look at it in a bit more from one step back. I think, again, that timing feels about right to me. So I understand where the questions comes from, but I think in terms of how it fits with what's happening, your very point earlier, Councillor, about there's a lot happening, it feels like the timing is about right to influence things. But good question. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Back to you, Danielle.
I think that's it from me. I'm finished. Thank you, everyone.
Excellent. Yes, I mean that's food for thought in terms of the schedule, I guess. So I think, Alex, we are on to internal update. I know you've got internal audit update. I know you've got a number of papers, one of which is the project management report. So over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the first paper you have in your pack today is our progress report. As you'll be aware, this just tracks the delivery of your current audit programme, and we have now come to the point that we've completed the 24-25 internal audit programme with one report, which I'll take you through as a separate paper in regards to project management. So very much, as I said, the progress paper just sets the scene, highlights any themes that we've seen from our control observations. And again, we continue to monitor that as we go through each audit programme as part of that. But I'll pause and have to take any questions anyone may have in terms of the delivery. Thank you.
Joanna.
Right, I'm looking at Appendix A, progress against the internal audit plan 24-25. You only do 4 audits a year, fine. Most of the findings are either low or occasionally you'll have one that's in the next category up. There are no findings in the highest category, which is very pleasing to see. Now, my question is this: you've done 4 audits, 50% have got substantial assurance, but 50% are less than substantial assurance. Do we have a performance standard regarding what category we expect to see? And if not, do we think that the criteria is maybe too stringent, given that most of the actions are low or medium in categorisation?
Thank you. So that's a good question in terms of the criteria. So just to clarify, just in terms of the criteria, are you looking at the audits that are covered, or the criteria around the categorisation of the actions, if that makes sense, just to make sure I understand?
Okay. If I look at the first audit that was done, it's got reasonable assurance because it's got 4 low category findings and 1 medium. And then the project management one has got 4 low and no medium actions, but then that's in the next category up. It seems, what I'm trying to say is, do you think the opinions are too stringent when there's so little difference between what would be thought of as reasonable assurance and what would be thought of as substantial assurance?
thank you for the clarification. Just wanted to make sure I understood the question. So in terms of our approach and our opinion, clearly there isn't a set number of actions that moves you to a substantial or reasonable. It's based on the control framework that we see in place. We also take into consideration any, I guess, that balance of actions that are already being taken within the organisation as well. Clearly, if there's been that identification that there is a gap, it shows that maturity of the organisation, and that is taken into consideration. There will be occasions sometimes, and not in this particular organisation that we've seen in the last couple of years, where there might be a high action and a prioritisation, but that may still move the opinion based on the wider control environment as well. There might just be one element of that particular control environment. So we look at it collectively in terms of obviously the risk register, the controls that have been identified, and that balance. But there's not a prescribed, and I'm not aware of, in terms of internal auditors as having a prescribed, if you have high action, it moves you to a substantial. It has to take into consideration the whole environment and that particular risk. That makes sense.
Do you think having a note to that effect on this summary page would be helpful?
More than happy to add some context. As I said, the progress paper, we continue to evolve in terms of meeting needs. I'm more than happy to include that. I'm happy to do that.
Do you think there's any need for a performance standard to do with achieving substantial assurance?
It's a really good question in terms of, I guess, performance standard. Everyone will strive in terms of having substantial in a particular area. I guess the question is, there'll always those areas that are evolving. And again, going back to your risk, we need to make sure we're focusing on some of your key risks. If we selected particular areas where we knew you were comfortable, you were testing out that assurance. But I guess it's having that maturity in that conversation we have, and it goes back to your question around if we've had some positive opinions in terms of what we've covered. There may be other areas, for example, around IT, fraud, where we've not looked at them, where obviously there may be a number of actions that come through. So it's quite hard, I guess, to have a specific performance standard to say we want to have X in terms of substantial, because it's that conversation to have as we move forward.
Thanks, John. So the the grading that you bring to this contract is generic. It's not specific to TFN, is it? The way that you grade or review the criteria that you use, that's a standard.
No, we have, so the categorizations have the detail in terms of low is your housekeeping, obviously high is your priority. Clearly different organisations will take a different stance in terms of the timescales for implementation. Some might set, if it's a high action, we want to see it closed off within a month or 2 months. Housekeeping might be a little bit longer. Some organisations do have that, I guess, that performance standard in terms of closing things off. So that's something to consider. But in terms of our approach, we follow obviously the internal audit standards, and obviously our methodology applies to that.
I think, to Joanna's point, I think it's just as important to state that as it is to state anything else, because it just gives the reader that additional bit of information and confidence that what's happening isn't specific or bespoke to us. It's a generic.
So if I go on to Appendix C, the key performance indicators, you've got them for how many days to issue the draft report, how many days to get back comments from management. It might be useful to have one in there to say, we expect, say, 75% of audits to achieve substantial assurance. It's only a suggestion.
Could I counter that? This is performance of the audit provider against a contract. I think it's useful sometimes to separate that from TFN's appetite for their own performance, because it's a measurement of TFN's performance, not necessarily RSM's performance. So I think what RSM are focused on Appendix C is very much themselves. And yeah, I guess there's a bit there where RSM are looking at that, thinking they can influence that process. But yeah, I mean, my point about Appendix C is going back to the audit code is, one of the things the audit code talks about in terms of auditor performance is your ability to identify redundant controls. And it's that kind of, this is all quite mechanistic, which is great, but it doesn't really give you a sense of the value that's being delivered. It can be viewed as a bit of a box ticking set of indicators in that sense. So I think something that's more attuned to the value that you're actually bringing compliance with the new code, getting under the skin of some of those things would be helpful, in addition to what's already. I'm not talking about replacing, but I think separating it from TFN's appetite is probably. It's just whilst I've got my mic open, just go back to the beginning of that report. You talk about themes arising from controlled observations, and you pick out poor record keeping. That's poor record keeping across all of those audits in that period.
Yes, that's
Right.
correct.
Okay. So the obvious question in terms of an update report is what if anything are management doing about that observation, because that's gold dust, is that, because it can be applied across all of the processes, even the ones that you haven't looked at. So that would be my pointer, I suppose.
Yes, and it's a good question. In terms of the, I guess the themes that we see, we will continue to track them. So as we see a particular, I guess, a pocket in terms of the theme, poor record keeping, it's something that we will have a conversation with Paul in terms of is this a wider theme? How does it link in, obviously, with Danielle in terms of the risk register and those controls that are in there, and how they play out across the organisation. But yes, it's a collective review of the themes.
Yeah. So the responsibility for monitoring that isn't yours; it's TFN's. So just be clear about where the responsibility for that sits.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes. Go ahead.
If I might just reflect on that a little bit, and also just blow Daniela's trumpet a little bit, because in addition to looking after the risk management, she's been helping us looking at how our management information systems more generally operate within TFN, and it's an area where we kind of acknowledge that we could probably do better, picking up on your point, Chair, about how we can improve. So I think the fact that it's kind of coming up as a poor record keeping here, I think for me reinforces the importance of the work you've done with others across the team, Daniela, around reviewing our approach to management information systems, and indeed we're kind of looking and using that review to then think about how do we organise ourselves to make that more effective. So I would hope over time this becomes less of an issue, because we've kind of addressed that issue about the flow of information, the visibility of information. So I find that helpful in that context. But you're right, Chair, it's an action on us, not on the internal auditors.
That's something to that. At the start, we were talking about how does the audit committee show its added value to the organisation? Well, this, I think, is an absolute prime example of how the audit committee adds value to the organisation, because if this has been found across the board in all audits, well, this needs to go up to the board, who will then say, right, everyone needs to look at their record keeping and see if it needs to be improved, and if so, do so. So I just think this is a great example of the value of this committee.
Chair, if I might I think there's been a comment from yourself and yourself, Councillor, about maybe we're not selling ourselves. Maybe we're selling ourselves a little short sometimes, and we're reporting the mechanistic and the process, but not actually the benefits and the consequences. And that's something we can take on board moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's to Joanna's point. I think it also draws or highlights rather the relationship, the connection between audit and risk.
Yeah.
So a theme that comes out of a series of audit reports is something that you should then see reflected within the risk management activities. Richard, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up and clarify some of the points which have just been raised. Obviously, RSM are the internal auditors, so each of their reviews is an independent and objective appraisal of the control environment. There's no way that they would set one of their KPIs that the client achieves substantial or whatever assurance. They could do 5 internal audits perfectly well, perfectly competently, and find out that there's limited assurance in all 5 areas they inspect. That's no reflection on the internal auditor's performance. Just to maybe clarify a point which we may come on to on the project management review, it would just be really simple to include a definition of minimal assurance, partial assurance, reasonable assurance, and substantial. That's just one real easy fix. There is a definition of what is meant by high, medium, and low priority management actions. And just to cover the point about the correlation between whatever the assurance level or assurance opinion is, there is no, in my, as a chief audit exec, there is no sort of massive magic formula. However, this committee would probably, or should, if an internal audit gives a substantial assurance, but there are 5 or 6 high priority, high level recommendations, then they would question, they could question why substantial level of assurance has been given. However, internal audit will always maintain that their conclusion on a review is their conclusion. It's theirs alone, and it's the opinion of normally it's the opinion of the auditor who wrote the report.
Grant, thanks, Richard. Interest of time and a really good discussion, and perhaps a little more than you were expecting, Alex, in respect to that particular report. So please carry on with other things.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the final report that you have for 24-25 is the project management review. For those that were on the committee a couple of years ago, we did do a piece on project management, and that was I guess a transition in terms of projects, what that meant for the organisation and how that was taken forward. So there's been a big step change in terms of the framework around projects, and there are currently 8 live projects as at the time of our field work, and very much this was to look at the new framework that's in place, benchmark it against good practice that we see in regards to the cradle to grave approach in terms of projects. And what is pleasing to see, obviously we provided substantial assurance. We've reviewed the tiered approach. So again, making sure, as you referred, Chair, in terms of redundant controls, what you don't want to do is obviously have a whole full approach in terms of projects for different sizes and scales. And we could see in terms of the projects that we looked at and the sampling that took place, there's that consideration of time, costs and risks, and also consideration around the documentation. So there are 4 actions that have been included, low priority. So again, that housekeeping in terms of the next steps. Again, we had good engagement throughout the audit around the next steps. So things, enhancements that can be made to the framework, and just making sure there's that consistency across the projects. But the framework is still relatively new. Not all projects have gone through the whole cycle at the moment. So I think, you know, it's pleasing to see that journey and the recognition in terms of sort of the next steps and the learning from projects as well, because we always find that is the element that never gets to be in place when there is a particular project. We can already see that there's all that consideration, and you know, a big step change in terms of when we did that first piece a couple of years ago, where there was a number of actions to think about, well, what projects have you got and what framework should be included, and should it be the same applied for every project? But pause, I'm happy to take any comments or questions anyone may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Alice. I think from memory, and correct me if I'm remembering it wrong, but the previous audit identified some what looked like pretty significant shortfalls in terms of process. So initiation documents weren't available for project work, etc. So things look as if they have indeed come a reasonable way here. Thank you, Colin.
I think in terms of, if I could just come in here, I think in terms of the project management framework, it's all in there, just a few slight tweaks here and there. But I think the main thing is to say that, you know, rolling out the framework is in its early stages. So the next step for TFN really is to just ensure that it's embedded and consistently applied across the organisation really.
Grant, thank you. Joanne, did you want to just update us in terms of the meeting circumstances, given that Colin has departed, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of the framework as well, I wanted to give assurance to the committee that messages are getting across to our staff about the framework, and reminders are being sent as well to them.
Have you put, sorry.
Yeah. So the meeting, the public meeting is now quorate. So the it is not quorate. And we are now going to go into a chief executive's consultation call, which we are allowed to do under the chief executive's delegated authority under the TFN constitution. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanna. Sorry, Joanna, go ahead.
My question was, it's a new process, it's a new way of working. Have staff been trained on this? I'm sure they have, but I just wanted to ask the question.
So in terms of the training rollout has been done in terms of our TFN live events, and there is a training program that's been developed for at corporate level.
And have you had feedback on that? On, you know, do staff feel that it's met their needs?
Do you want with this one? I'm going to have to come back to you if that's okay via email, and just on whether there's been any feedback or not.
Grant, thank you. Alex, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. So just in terms of the further paper, we requested just to include the follow-up, which you will have seen before in terms of the papers. It was a follow-up that we'd done earlier on in the year. There are 2 actions which are ongoing, and I've got revised dates, which is 31st of May and 30th of April. Sorry, apologies, not 2. I said there's 4 in terms of the follow-up. Get my numbers mixed up. So just to reassure you, obviously, in terms of this stage we go through with our follow-up, is we will undertake our further follow-up as part of the 25-26 audit plan, and again validate that those actions have indeed been implemented. But that's just for information purposes for those that hadn't necessarily seen this report at prior committee. Okay, thank you. And then the final paper from myself today is our internal audit plan and strategy. If you recall, at the last meeting, we had a discussion around the areas for consideration for the 25-26 audit plan. And obviously you have your the strategy as well, which gives you coverage of prior years in terms of the assurance levels that have been provided, and the forward-looking plan as well. So in terms of the areas that have been included, I think there was an agreement at the last meeting in terms of the focus, and obviously what you have in this paper today is high-level summary of the audit area, but also the relevant risk in terms of the particular area, as well as the proposed timing. There is one proposed change to this audit plan, and that is in regards to the cyber security review. So you'll see, obviously, it says April 26 in terms of timing, and there's a proposal for a change to the audit programme so that we can have a review on from a fraud health check perspective. So the fraud health check perspective will be completed in 25-26, but we'd make sure obviously this cyber security review was done as the earliest point in your 26-27 audit programme. And that's very much after discussions, obviously, at the last meeting in terms of some of your policies, and really just having that the health check in terms of the fraud arrangements that counter fraud arrangements that you have in place. So today I'm asking for committee's approval in terms of the areas that are in the programme, with that subject to that one change, and just make sure you're comfortable that the audit programme is reflective, obviously, of your assurance needs and obviously your current risks, noting obviously that we can flex the audit plan in year, as we have done before, if you have any particular areas of coverage that you'd like us to consider. But I'll pause at that stage for any comments. Thank you.
Comments? Richard, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just to know, or just to, I see internal audit strategy. That's something I'm grappling with because that is one part of the global standards to have an audit strategy. To 26-27. The question is, how long has RSM signed up to be the internal audit? Does it stretch to beyond 26-27?
Thank you very much. So in terms of our contract, we're in our second year of a 3-year contract. And again, in terms of the, I guess the columns, in terms of strategy, again, we can extend them if there's that consideration. More than happy. As I said, we revisit them every year anyway, in terms of, as you'll know, in terms of making sure we had that risk profile. But if it's something you'd like to see as more of a trajectory moving forward, more than happy to consider that, whether it was us undertaking that or otherwise. But it just makes sure we capture all the comments from committee and the executive team.
So 26-27 is outside of your current contract, is that right?
That will be the third year in terms of what.
It's 26-27 is in your scope contract, right? Okay, brilliant. Thank you. If we just went with calendar years, things would be so much easier. Okay, grand. Thank you, Alex. Was that everything on internal audit? Sorry, I'm just you know how I feel about audit. It's always a shame to.
That is everything. If everyone's happy with the audit programme, obviously your next progress paper will reflect the new year plan, and obviously we will be providing our annual summary to the next meeting, which concludes all the work that we've done through 24-25.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So we're on to, I think, Joanne, annual governance statement. I do feel slightly pressed for time. I don't want to rush either the external audit report or the review of the business plan, just to put some unnecessary pressure on you in terms of governance statements. Sorry.
So very, very briefly, Chair, what we've got here is we've got the updated annual governance statement, which we brought to the committee in December 2024. We took on board all the committee members' comments, and this has been included in the new statement. And we also took some further amendments from senior officers as well. You'll see in the conclusion that we confirm that Transport for the North's governance arrangements are effective and fit for purpose. If members are minded, we would like them to note the amendments and to note that this draft will then be submitted into the annual accounts, which have to be published on the 31st of July 2025. Thank you. Is there any questions?
I didn't mean to rush you, perhaps that much, but yeah, and I've also, and I'd like to apologise to Joanne for sending my comments through a little late, but I've also provided some pointers. There's one particular example in section 4, section D, which is all about decision making. And it's really a journey, I think, that TFN is on with some of its reporting documents, which is not listing solely the activities, but also looking to provide evidence of outcomes. So there isn't much, if anything, in that narrative that actually speaks to decision making. There are enablers, but there are no actual decisions, and it's just that sort of alternative perspective sometimes in terms of how we capture and how we evidence that governance is actually making a difference. But you know, that's.
Thank you, Chair. We have been reviewing the comments you've made, and we'll be looking to see how we can incorporate your comments into the annual governance statement. Thank you.
Bless you. Okay. Are we okay with that? Good. Right. Thank you. So we are now on to Daniel, the auditor's annual report, which includes reference to your unqualified opinion on the TFN statement of accounts, which we covered in December and which went to the board. There's also reference in there to the pensions adjustment and detail in respect of that. But just to put some context around this report, I think this is an excellent report, particularly the detail that it provides around value for money. And again, it's going back to the conversation we've had a couple of times and some of the points that Joanna's made about value. The amount of detailed assurance that we can take from this report and which subsequently the board can take from this report, I think it's difficult to overstate that. So thank you for providing it with as much detail and obvious rigor as you have. So over to you, Daniel.
Thanks, Chair. I wasn't going to go through this page by page because a lot of this you have seen before. This is the auditor's annual report, which is the final report for the 23-24 financial year. In December, we brought the audit completion report, which essentially said we're at the end of the audit. This is what we intend to issue in terms of the opinion. This is the public-facing report that sits on TFN's website that says what opinions we did issue. So it does confirm we issued an unqualified opinion in January and didn't identify any significant weaknesses in TFN's value for money arrangements. It includes the commentary that you've just referred to in there as well, which again we brought as part of the December papers. So that's just a repeat of what you have seen before. I suppose just to provide some more context, I keep referring to the backstop in the wider local audit market. Being signed off like this is a real achievement for TFN and for other local authorities. I don't know what the results are yet nationally for 23-24, but certainly out of ours, it was about 45% of audits that achieved an unqualified opinion in 23-4. So it just sets out what an achievement it is and actually what a good quality set of accounts we got, and the amount of support we get from Paul and from Lisa throughout the process means that we can complete this audit really quickly. Obviously still to a high quality, so I'm sure Lisa and Paul feel very challenged at the end of the audit process. But now that that backstop's out of the way, it means that going forward we can pull that process forward again back to a normal timeline. So I think the deadline for producing the accounts this year is the end of June, and we'll come in July and do the audit. We didn't start the audit until September last year, so it brings it forward a couple of months, and hopefully we'll be able to provide that opinion next year much earlier, before I'm hoping before Christmas anyway. But we'll have those discussions on timelines with Lisa and Paul in the coming weeks. The only other thing that's new in here is the audit fee proposal, which is going to public sector audit appointments for approval in a couple of weeks' time. They do that on a cyclical basis, their approval. The scale fee is what they set, and the fee for ISA 315, which was a new auditing standard in year. Sorry, it was new in 22-23, but they hadn't incorporated that into the scale fee for 23-24. They have done for 24-5, so that fee in there is just mirroring what they have incorporated in future. So it's a bit odd that they've told us what the fee is, but then we have to submit that as a fee variation for their approval. But that's the process we're in. The only sort of additional element is the work on the pensions, where we had to do work on the asset ceiling, and that adjusted the accounts. Again, although the fee's gone up, it's based on PSA's hourly rate, which went up in 23-4. So actually, it's same number of hours. It's just on a new rate. But happy to take any questions on any of the report.
Thank you, Daniel. Are we okay? Joanna, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that not only do I think it's an excellent report, I think it's an excellent outcome. You know, this is a significant achievement for TFN.
Thank you. Grand. Thank you, Daniel. Super. So we have budget and business planning, Martin. I think my favourite line from the document was reference to the fact that TFN's role is more relevant now than it ever has been, or some such. My words, not yours. But no, go ahead.
So thank you, Chair. I mean, you've got before you the draft business plan, as Daniela mentioned earlier. The funding letter was received from the Department for Transport on the 24th of February. We had been working, as we always do, closely with DFT officials throughout the winter and into the early part of this year. So we were sharing our business planning assumptions with them. They were kind of understanding and kind of being able to kind of reflect and advise as appropriate without prejudging ministerial decisions. So I think the fact that we were in the right space reassures me that we've got a good, strong relationship with the DFT. I think I was just going to quickly mention about the fact that there are some really helpful comments within the letter that came from the department, recognising the work that we do for our partners, our local transport authorities, both the mayors and the counties and unitaries, talking about the transport-related social exclusion work, which is really genuinely groundbreaking work and has recently been updated. The work we've done on EV charging infrastructure, but it was also interesting to see the reference explicitly moving forward about the value being put on the work we do to help with capacity and capability of our partners, both within the region and also beyond. And as we've touched on in this meeting before, the TFN offer and what that provides in terms of access to information and the ability to realise savings for the wider public sector. I mean, that's a core strength for us. So you've got the draft business plan. That's the narrative. We'll be taking the business plan narrative plus the figures to the board on the 17th of March. The narrative has been developed over the course of the autumn and into the winter, working first of all with a steer from the main board. Again, reflecting some of the comments earlier, recognising that last May with the mayoral elections, we had new board members, recognising with July we had a change in administration nationally. So that has led to changes in the external environment, and the process through the autumn and into the winter, working with the main TFN board, working with their executive directors to understand where is it you see us adding value, building on the strengths that we've got. And that has actually required us to take a step back from certain areas that we were doing or planning on doing this year. And that's just part of life's richness. So what you've got before you in the narrative is being worked through. It's already been with our colleagues on the scrutiny committee last week, and there was good feedback on there. One or two things that we need to pick up, which we will do in terms of the report going to the main board. But I'm confident that what we've got here is a business plan that kind of really does show and demonstrates the added value that we can then move on to as part of the now ongoing conversation with the department around the spending review beyond this. So the funding settlement is for 1 year, for 25-26. We knew it was always going to be 1 year. there is a conversation now to be had as part of the spending review goes forward about how we move that into a multi-year funding settlement moving forward. The indications are that spending review will be 5-year capital settlement, 3-year revenue settlement. I would be wanting to make sure that we're working with the department to try and secure a 3-year revenue settlement, but that will obviously be dependent upon the Chancellor's announcement later this summer, and then a subsequent conversation over the course of the rest of the summer into the autumn. So, Chair, I think hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour of where we are. I'm very happy to take any questions on it.
Joanna?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think this is a very impactful business case. I think it's very forward thinking. And my favourite line is the size of the prize is huge.
Richard, comments?
Yeah, I'll just echo that. I mean, in terms of risk and business assurity, I suppose that would be getting the 3-year settlement will be a massive thing for forward planning. So I hope that comes through. But yeah, a good plan. And I suppose the question would be, at the next committee, we'll get the output from your meeting on the 17th of March, and we can review that then.
Yeah, I mean, does that give sufficient time to update the business planning objectives? Is that probably not?
So in terms of the objectives for 25-26, this is what you've got before you. I think just going back to the longer term, what I take comfort from is the fact that in the Secretary of State's letter to us with the funding settlement, she talks about the role of subnational transport bodies playing in supporting both local and national government priorities. And it's very clear about working on a pan-regional approach for developing transport strategies, which is of course our statutory role, focusing on pan-regional connectivity, and as I said, this capacity and capability. Now, as a statutory body, we have the comfort of knowing we have powers and responsibilities delegated to us from Parliament from the department. So I think that's a fairly strong statement by the Secretary of State in terms of her support for Transport for the North as a statutory body moving forward. I think that gives us a good foundation on which to have those conversations with the department about a 3-year funding settlement for beyond 25-26. But as I'm sure everybody around the table, that's not going to be an easy conversation because we know the financial pressures, but I think it does give us a good foundation on which to build.
Thank you, Martin. It was milestones. Sorry, yes, sorry. I misspoke. I apologize.
And on milestones, Chair, I think if I could just ask your indulgence on that, with the funding letter dropping only on the 24th, and with the fact that we need to go through various cycles, what we're working at the moment is, as a team, we can now kind of firm up where we're going to focus, and working through as a team, we'll be focusing on what those objectives, the milestones are. And I actually take away some of the comments from earlier conversations. I'm keen that we make those milestones as specific as we possibly can, so we can judge some progress. So, for example, I would want there to be something about the TFN offer, but I'd like us to almost set a bit of a challenging target about how much use we're going to be seeing of it. So rather than talking about maintaining the TFN off, how can we grow that? And I know that the team have got ideas about that. So set ourselves a challenge in terms of the target that we can then measure ourselves against.
Grand, thank you. So I was trying to find something against which to measure this, as you do, and because it does sound very convincing and it's very well written. And I'll share something with you that I picked up, which is a positive thing, because it's a piece of independent research which is saying very much what the business plan is saying. And I think that gives us confidence, some additional confidence that what's being proposed makes sense. So there's a piece of work done last year by the National Institute of Economic and Social Research, and it was about regional connectivity. So this was a piece of work not looking at bodies, It was looking at data about congestion, connectivity, and how that fitted across the different modes of transport. And I've got two quotes to read you, if you'll indulge me just for a second. This is taken from the sort of summary and the conclusion of the work. It says the focus should be on optimizing connectivity to align with policy goals like reducing carbon emissions, promoting social inclusion, and fostering economic growth. And you can read all of that within the business plan. The second quote, it says, our analysis highlights the need for sustainable infrastructure that can help deliver inclusive growth. Reliable and well-integrated transport networks are essential for improving access to labour markets, attracting skilled workers, and encouraging investment. Now, those two quotes could have been taken from the business plan. Actually, they were provided by an independent body. Now, I share that because it's a way of trying to triangulate the information that we're presented with by TFN. Sometimes it's kind of difficult because we don't have other organisations to go to in terms of being able to do that. So I'll share the link because it's on a rainy weekend afternoon. Maybe you can work through it.
If I may, Chair, and again, I think this shows how the big milestone we had last calendar year was obviously getting the strategic transport plan agreed and adopted by the main TFN board. But we were very clear as part of the implementation of that, then the monitoring and the evaluation is really important. So we did the first monitoring and evaluation report last year. I know that the strategy team have got some really great ways of thinking about how we can develop that and make it available not just to within the TFN family, but also more generally. But I'd also just reflect on last autumn, we published our state of play report on the EVI, the electric vehicle charging infrastructure. And so we were actually being able to capture at a moment in time just how many additional charging facilities have been placed, just how many electric vehicles, and that then gives you the measure of saying, okay, well, we've got this far in the last 12 months. If we're going to achieve our target by 2030, what needs to, what's the size of the gap? And I think as we now really do get embedded on that implementation aspect of the STP, you'll see that kind of monitoring and evaluation coming through and allowing us then to either react to consultations about changes in the way things are delivered, or whether it's about financial statements and set pieces on a regular basis within government. But I think it starts to get us into that. This is a strategy. This is how we're getting on with it. And this is how we're getting on in delivering that, as you say, the prize, the 118 billion.
Grand, Martin, thank you. I think the other point that I was reflecting on was I was reading that sort of narrative. The introduction to the business plan in particular was Stephen's not with us anymore, but the points that he was raising in terms of the sense that we have as committee members, our understanding and knowledge of business planning and strategy of TFN. I was actually quite disappointed that it was the lowest score, but perhaps that's reflective of the turnover of members that we've had, the fact that some members were very new. But it's this kind of document that as members we should really be absorbing, because it gives us all the information we need to provide us with that context within which we can think about risk and within which we can think about audit. And I one of the first things I said to Martin was last year or the year before was giving the committee the context within which to work is so important. But having said that, committee members have a responsibility themselves to find that context out. We shouldn't expect things to be delivered to us all of the time, but this has been delivered to us, and it's worth reading more than once. Would be my now the final material element we have on the agenda was the quarterly operating report from October-December. I'm guessing that some, if not all of that, has been overtaken by events, I suppose, and has been supplanted by the business plan. But I didn't know whether there was anything, Martin, you wanted to pick out from that.
I think you're right, Chair, and it's one of those consequences of the cycles that we work within in terms of the meetings. It's always a little bit of a lag, but you're right. I think throughout the autumn and into the winter, the primary focus for a lot of us was around the business planning. If you remember the quarterly operating report, the milestones that were set out within it were those agreed by the board in March 24. And so obviously we've had the general election subsequently, which is why you've seen us report on the quarterly report the changes. I think the one thing I would kind of, not wishing to hide our light under a bushel, is I think genuinely the TFN offer is gaining, it feels like it's gaining real momentum. We've known for some time that our individual constituent authorities are using it greatly, whether it's the metropolitan, the MCAs, or whether it's the individual local authorities. We've just got a report going next week, sorry, on the 17th again, to the main board, giving an update. And you're starting to see Avanti's drawing on information. You're seeing the electricity companies drawing on the information. We've even had East Sussex County Council drawing on the information. That's because quite a lot of the information we hold and the tools and the frameworks are actually applicable more widely. But I think that kind of talks to the point that we've got to make sure we capture it's a value for money, not just for our constituent authorities, but when we talk about it being for the wider public sector, it's becoming increasingly evident that the scale and the interest is there. And we continue to try and capture and put some numbers around this, because I think that's going back to the point on the business plan, a conversation with the department and government around a 3-year funding settlement, which says this is the value we've delivered, these are the scale and the size of the bodies that we're influencing, and therefore why wouldn't you want to build on this? I think that's a really compelling argument. So that was the one thing, Chair, I was just going to highlight, partly because I think we should be celebrating and talking about the successes, because it is a real measure of what we're achieving and the quality of the people we've got in the teams.
Grand, thank you again. Okay. So, talking about performance, I feel as though I've shortchanged everybody because we now seem to have bags of time at the end of the meeting, which is something I need to reflect on. Sorry, Joanna, because it was you specifically that I rushed. Sorry. Too good. Is one way to look at it. So the next meeting we have is the 18th of July. I've already checked. I'm not on holiday. But maybe that's something that we can all look at. Daniela, go ahead. You're on holiday.
Be around for the section at the beginning, but then unfortunately I'm going to have to leave after that. That's okay.
Holiday travel, is that you've got to get to the airport by 1 o'clock? Is that what it is?
Also, if I may, just back to Councillor Baker Rogers' query before on the project management. So we've rolled out the training for project management as part of TFN Live. Then what our last senior management meeting that we had, we fed back the results of the management actions from the management action audit. And as part of that, no feedback has come in from the training that we've had. However, it is something that we're going to look at as we sort of continuously embed the process now and ensure. Hope that helps. Thanks.
Brand. Super. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. See you in July. Those who are not on holiday or traveling. Right. Thank you.
Thank you.